Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. It is Saturday morning, a little after 10 a.m. Uh, it's the 14th of the month, and believe it or not, half the month is almost over. Seems like the year just started. Uh, but nevertheless, here we are. Uh, Usually, we start off with asking, "Are there any questions?" Uh, just a slight difference this morning. We ended on Monday. Monday, we were talking from uh, Matthew 12, and we were looking at what is a Gentile and talking a little bit uh, about some of the verses there. One of the things we pointed out there was them thinking that Jesus was healing by uh, by the devil Beelzebub, and what that meant. That religion has moved to a place or lives in a place rather that it cannot see truth, cannot understand or comprehend truth. Uh, and we even link that to um, the previous lesson that we had in First Samuel, where Hannah was praying and Eli did not recognize what she was doing. He thought she was drunk. So that showed the contrast there of what truth looks like and how for that level of consciousness is away from religion that is not even recognized. It looks foreign to them. But in the midst of all of that, a couple of questions came up, and I asked Evelyn if she would to write her question down, uh, and we'd look at it today. And I want to start with Charles's question. Charles asked about resurrection, and when he did, uh, George text me uh, some scripture. I was looking at it from the perspective of John 11, where Lazarus dies, and Jesus said, I am the resurrection, the truth. So I want to look at that and talk just a few minutes about what is resurrection, and but that scripture is really sort of important, and maybe hopefully at some point we'll take a look at it. But if I just get started, and you guys please help out here, what you see. But resurrection, we automatically think about it as a corpse, somebody who has died, a physical body who has died, which is brought back to life. And it indeed is talking about uh, something that is dead or is not recognized to have life anymore. So it is something that once lived, but it is not necessarily. It's not necessarily talking about a corpse or a body. Truth is being resurrected as we speak. That is what we do on a weekly basis. Resurrection comes from a word that means to stand up or to rise up or to stand firm for for something or to arise. So what we're doing is standing firm on what we see, what we believe, and as we talk about it all the time, putting it out there in the macro. So resurrection then being a spiritual thing is not just based on what is physical, but it reaches far beyond that. It's something that affects the entire universe. So anyone else want to help me out with that? If you would, please.
Good morning, Ron, and good morning, everyone. And
Good morning,
speaking
George.
on that scripture, as we have the opportunity just to meditate, on that, as you mentioned, in terms of seeing it as death. But in the Aramaic, it speaks about meditation on what is no longer needed in our inner life, what can die before death. And so, again, when we think about it, in terms of those uh, challenges that we face that cause division, isolation, or to create the things that are not of Elohim, I think that it's good, to know that there's things that we can remove ourselves from that has us to be in that stagnant state where we can be resurrected. I think I might have mentioned last week, it's just, a blessing that we can read and understand, about the resurrection of Christ. But I just truly, appreciate the day that we too have the opportunity to be resurrected. And so not looking at it, as you said, Ron, in terms of just death, but looking at it in terms of removing those uh, uh, things that sometimes cause us to miss the mark. And also, I just wanted to mention that it talked about the importance of rest and renewal. And I think in our understanding of resurrection, we can look at it at that point, where sometimes we just need to be still and rest. And when that opportunity of renewal takes place in terms of the manifestation of our heart's desire, we can become alive, in that way that we can move forward. So I just wanted to, just share, that information, as you had mentioned earlier, it's not just about the physical death, but it's being able to appreciate, that inner life, that we can let go of those things that sometimes keep us, in that dormant stage. I'm done. I just want to share those thoughts. Thank you, Ron.
Oh, thank you. Great explanation, George. Great add-on. I like that. You're exactly right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, George. You opened something up when you talked about resurrection, dealing with the inner self. And however, when we talk about resurrection, we suppose it has nothing to do with at all with the resurrection of Christ, the resurrection of Jesus, the way that we have been taught. Suppose that it only deals with you taking a stand once you begin to see the fallacy of what you have been taught. All of the things that we have been taught are in the macro. And the difficulty with purging from those things we've been taught is because they have been so deeply ingrained in the macro until you always hear it, even when you don't have the voice of someone speaking. But you know it's there because you can't seem to get away from what you've been taught. And when we think about it, what we have been taught is death. And when we talk about resurrection, when we talk about standing something up, when we talk about being revived, we are talking about being removed from that crypt of death and being made alive again in the midair of spirituality. I say that because it is my contention that the portion that we have been taught about the physicality of the resurrection is pretending to be a historical presentation of what happened in this Palestinian land that's now called Israel. If that is true, then why is it that there are 0 people on the face of the earth who can trace their lineage to anyone in the Bible, period? Show me a grave site where anyone in the scriptures were buried, including Jesus. If you are able to trace your lineage if you are able to point to burial sites, if there are people on this earth who can point to a cemetery that's been in their family for thousands of years, why is it that we cannot find a burial place for those who are in the Bible? It's simply because the Bible is not about history. The Bible is about spirituality, and spirituality is about the interworkings of the energy within your body in conjunction with the physical aspects of your body. Your body, our bodies, are made up of the same atoms that the universe is made up of. The difference is that energy, that cosmic energy, uses its power to form around this energy or in the midst of this energy a physical body. So when we talk about resurrection, we are talking about taking a stand for truth. We're talking about being revived from the things that we have been taught the truth to be, and beginning to see the truth for what it really is. When we talk about Jesus being resurrected, or when we talk about Christ being resurrected, if we look at those, Christ or Jesus the Christ, if we look at that as resurrection, then are we saying that there was a period when Christ was dead, when the anointing was dead? Are we saying that someone we have been taught is 100% God died? How can that be possible? What we're actually saying, the scripture actually teaching us rather, is that when we are taught to live by something that is contrary to what's in the scriptures, it is at that point that we face death. The extrication of the energy from the body, we call it death because the body is no longer with us. And the writers of the scriptures called it death for the same reason. However, if we look beyond the writings of the scriptures and see what came before the writings of the scriptures, we will see that it takes a totally different turn in terms of what resurrection is all about. The bottom line is this: resurrection is when we began to understand the true nature of what the ancestors has given us through hieroglyphics in Egypt, through the linguistic structures prior to Egypt. All of these things are the beginnings of understanding truth. And when we deny the existence of them, or when we call the hieroglyphics pagan, or when we call people prior to the entrance of Europeans into the earth pagans, then that is a type of arrogance that exceeds any arrogance in the earth. Because what we're actually saying is that the true nature of resurrection is when Jesus was resurrected from the ground. And the only ones who said that, the only one who has taught us that, are the people who have been in this earth for 70,000 years. Everybody else 300,000 or better, whatever it is. That in itself is saying that everybody on this earth who ever lived is wrong except Europeans. So that's the difference between the resurrection of truth and the death of truth. The death of truth is not knowing it exists, and that's what we have been taught by religion. Unless there are questions or comments, I'm done. Thank you.
Questions, anyone?
Good morning, everyone. As it relates to the word resurrected, at one time I associated the resurrection just with Jesus Christ. Yet every day, I'm not going to say every day, yet I do make an attempt to improve on myself in any kind of arena. And earlier this week, a driver got into an accident. I was talking to the HR person about it, and she read his narrative, and she stated there's a lot of incredulity in his narrative. And I said, Ms. M, please forgive me. What does incredulity mean? And she said, skepticism. I said, thank you. I learned something today. So when I look at resurrected, I look at coming out of an arena that could be good and in another arena that is excellent. So I think we've all been resurrected, well, at least I have, of coming out of the United Methodist Church and always having a minister, bishop, or district superintendent talk at you by way of a sermon. And just to be part of a discussion of questions, it's a new arena for me. So I'm resurrected. That part of me, and what I've learned from it is no one likes to be talked at. And the attention span someone is talking to you is really less than 90 seconds. However, by way of a discussion, you have more equity in time. Your vertebrae take a liking to it, spinal nerves, just by way of a discussion. So that's how I apply the word resurrected. And is that fair to say or not fair to say? Thank you.
It's fair to say because that's what you believe. It's fair to believe based upon what resurrection is and what we've been taught. It's not fair to you to hold on to that, but it is fair in a different way. It's not fair to you because it's not reflective of what we are to know, to learn, to be. It is fair to you because it has brought you to this place where we can see further than we've ever seen before. When we talk about resurrection, we are talking about living from the inside out. And I doubt very seriously if we understand the totality of that. What does it mean? What does it look like to live from the inside out? When you live from the inside out, the results is this. How to do it will come later. Or what it looks like, rather, will come later. When you live from the inside out, you don't reflect on what happens in the physical realm that tells you what spirituality is. That's the very thing that has messed us up. Looking for the material world to explain to us spirituality. Living from the inside out, we began to understand the relationship between the fluids, the organs, and the nervous system, or the different systems of the body, in relationship to our energy forces, which is actually spirituality. And when we understand the interaction of those organs and those systems within the confines of this thing called the body, it is then that we begin to live from the inside out. And when we begin to live from the inside out, that's when we are able to see more clearly the advantages and what resurrection looks like. Right now, you said that we are resurrected, and I can agree with that to a point. We are in the process of being resurrected. Resurrection does not come overnight. Resurrection comes in 3 days. Resurrection comes in 3 days because 3 speaks to the idea of divine perfection or divine completion. So what that's actually saying is that the completion of resurrection is only accomplished when the divine essence of your being recognize it for what it is. The number 3 is not 3 days. Doesn't speak to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 3 days speaks. 3 days speaks to the period. The periods rather that leads us to the place of resurrection, or that resurrects us. When it talks about 3 days, the night is the wisdom, and the next day is the understanding of that wisdom. And it takes moving into the darkness and out of the darkness for resurrection to take place, meaning we move into the cloud of wisdom, searching for ourselves, searching for understanding. And when we move out, or when we are called out of the darkness, we have the enlightenment of the wisdom that we visited within the confines of that darkness. How long does it take that process of divine completion to bring us to that place of resurrection? That is strictly based upon the interworkings of the energy in conjunction with the desires within the structure of our bodies. So it's not the same period at the time of resurrection. It's not the same time that I'm resurrected or anyone else is resurrected. It's based upon those aspects of the movement in and out of wisdom. And a true desire to be detached from the physical realm that influences us. Meaning, you're not detached from the physical realm, but you do not allow the internal essence of your being to be influenced by the spiritual, by the physical realm. The physical realm is there as a guidepost, so you can see what needs to be changed, while you at the same time are being changed from the inside out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
George, you want to raise the question?
I'll say that.
Yes, sir.
Makes
Yes,
sense.
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the 3 days has nothing to do with actual days. It's just your journey, your process.
Yes, your journey to completion. Your journey to resurrection. One day we'll talk about that.
And I also take it the perfection has to do more with your complete understanding or your place of recognizing who you are and not backing off of that anymore. You're no longer at a place where you vacillating. You see it, you understand it, and you embrace it. So, am I on the right track of that? Because the three also represents perfection. So,
I not so much that we understand it all, but we embrace it all, whether we understand it or not.
okay.
And what I mean by that is this. I don't mean that you're embracing something simply because somebody else said it. I mean that you are embracing something because it resonates with you deeply. There are so many things that has resonated with us that we can't regurgitate. We can't even recall it in memory. But at that moment, it resonated so deeply until we embraced it. We may never remember it again, but embracing it is the thing that brings us to that place of resurrection. The things that Jesus taught, and we'll talk about who Jesus is someday, other than what we've been taught it is. The things that were taught were not understood by the recipients of what was of the one, but the recipients of what Jesus said. Yet it resonated so deeply until they stuck with it. And in the absence of Jesus from them in their own mind, they began to vacillate. So when we see what the principles are of the kingdom, and we begin to embrace them because they make so much sense, because they resonate so deeply, it doesn't mean necessarily that we understand the totality of them. However, it does mean we have a desire to understand them. And the struggle with understanding them is the very struggle that strengthens our resolve to truly find out what it means to be who we were created to be, i.e. Elohim. Without those struggles between what the disciples have been taught, those struggles of what we've been taught, those struggles of what we embrace in religion, without those struggles, we would not have the desire to move beyond those struggles and see what reality is. So the question becomes, if that's all we've seen all of our lives, why is it that it's a struggle as opposed to something that we resolve ourselves to live with, because there's nothing else that can be true except it? Why is that so? Because there is something built in every one of us that recognizes the truth when they hear it. And I'm not talking about with the ear. I'm talking about when you hear it. The reason it's so difficult to hear it is because we have for so long been taught to tune it out. And when we tune the truth out, it is difficult for us to allow truth in, because we are told you're not Baptistic, you're not a true Methodist, you're not a real Christian, you are pretending, those kinds of things. But yet there are those who have persevered and questioned in spite of the threat of extrication from the church or from the religious sector, have persevered anyway. Why? Because there are those who have chose to open up themselves to whatever is there in search of themselves. And in finding and search for truth, you find yourself. Yet, there are those who don't know who they are. And if you're not careful, they will use the language of religion, the oppressive language of politics, the oppressive language of history in order to make you feel uncomfortable about your pursuit of truth. Does that make sense, Ron?
Yes, sir. It does.
Are there questions about that? May I say something else?
Of course.
This whole idea about the scriptures, the Bible, the characters thereof, have been 100% misconstrued. Because of the conflation between history and spirituality.
Between what now? You say history?
History, yes.
Okay, okay.
History is extremely important because history is supposed to be a true story, but we know it's his story, whoever wrote it. The trueness of history shows us how people lived culturally, how they communicated linguistically, how they maintained their unicity, their oneness with the earth as well as the universe. The scriptures, the Bible, are the writings of those from antiquity who tells us a story of how that works, of how we are restored to that, how to be restored to that place of oneness with the universe, with the earth. But one of the things that pushed me in this direction, or guided me, I should say, pushed this word because there was no resistance from me. That guided me in that direction was a thought that I pondered while I was gone last week. One thing that came to me last week while I was gone was, how is it that a real man named Moses was born in a place called Egypt during a period when they had to make brick without straw? The structures of the pyramids, the structures, buildings in Egypt. How could that be true when, if you look at it chronologically, Moses' birth was 2,000 plus years after Egypt was built, or after the pyramids were built, after the structures in Egypt were raised. So what does that mean? Could that possibly be a story that's been related to us meaning humanity, throughout the annals of time, so that we could pass on to generations to come the structured understanding of the relationship between the universe, the relationship between the spirit and the story that is being told has been given to us for the express purpose of justifying oppression when it was intended for the opposite. If that is the case, and I truly believe it is, then all of these carriages and all of these genealogies are more of a message, for lack of a better term, how to, than it is a chronological listing of the genealogy of men who lived or women who lived. It's actually a message hidden in all the genealogies. And if you take the genealogies and you look at the meanings of the names and you write them beside each other, if you got Moses, means to draw out and go down the line with that. What you will find is a story that is spoken about the emotions within us and how we are to respond to them, how we are to reform them so that they don't move us in a direction that is adverse to the journey we are supposed to be taking. And the reason this story was written on scrolls 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, however long it was, is because our Creator knew that the day would come when there would be people who would seek to find themselves, find the one who created them, rather than suffer the extinction of humanity again. And here we are in search of ourselves and having found, in search of God, really, and having found God, we have found ourselves. Once that is done, the question becomes, what do you do with that? Absolutely nothing, with the exception of seeking to understand the nuances of what that means. And in understanding the nuances of what that means, you begin to see with the eye. And when you begin to see and read, see with the eye and read with the soul, that is when we began to see that this story of the Scriptures is a story about us, not physically, but spiritually. Being in a cramped space, being enslaved, being caught up in impossible situations, meaning that situations where we are forced physically to do things that borders on impossible, but yet finding that we are able to accomplish them, and coming to the place where you are fed up, not just with the shackles physically, but with the shackles spiritually also. Because emancipation did not free us from slavery, it transformed what slavery is. And understanding that, what we first sought was resistance through violence, resistance through hatred, resistance through separation. And that is because we were taking the Scriptures literally. When we take the Scriptures spiritually, what we see is the movement into the wilderness is simply understanding that we are purposed in this earth to draw the unrightness, the darkness, the brutality, the barbaric nature out of humanity in the wilderness. In the midst of our confusion, it is our responsibility to draw all of those things that are adverse to who we are out of humanity. And that is an internal thing. Because if you cannot draw out of you those attributes that has pitted us against those who have oppressed, murdered, and otherwise sought to extinguish us from the earth. If we cannot draw that out of us, then we won't be able to draw it out of anyone else. That is where loving kindness and forgiveness comes in. If we cannot truly forgive, we can't truly love. If we cannot truly forgive those who have treated us the worst, have sought to remove us from the face of the earth, if we cannot forgive them, then we cannot truly love, because love for your family is easy. The love for those who have lynched you is difficult. However, it's not just an important thing to do. It is imperative that is done. Because that's what draws out all of those entanglements, and that's what the scripture is talking about. Love covers a multitude of entanglements, meaning that out of all of the things that has transpired external of you that affected you internally, are to be covered, or to be redeemed by your love for the source of those infractions. It doesn't mean that you submit to them. It means that you submit to the essence of your being. And in doing so, you draw them, those adverse things out of you, and at the same time, it's necessary for you to talk about it. Why? Because change, according to what the book says, comes by speech. Creation comes by speech. If you want to create a different type of environment in this earth when it comes to the interaction of humanity, then we must bring it to life with our breath and our sound. The breath is the spirit, the sound is the material world. And if we are to do that, then we must, in doing that, what we are actually doing is making it available to everyone else. And what I mean by that is we are putting it in the macro in order for humanity to have access to it. And the macro is not the atmosphere at all. The macro is the spiritual essence of all of us. So we put it in a place where the energy flows, and the energy of our speech flows to everyone on this earth. The question is whether or not they're going to embrace it. That's what this story is about, coming out of Egypt, going into the wilderness, and crossing into the promised land. Of course, it's more in depth because it happens internally. But it is a picture of a consciousness that have been promised to us if we trust our period in the wilderness, as did the story about the deliverer being in the wilderness and being challenged by those outside things, but responding from the inside out, thus having delivered itself from the bondage of the priesthood, having delivered itself from the bondage of this physical realm, becoming a spiritual entity that is capable of bringing others to the place where you are. And it does indeed go beyond the wilderness of confusion. It does go beyond the promised land. But I think I've said enough. I'm just hoping you understand it and seeing if there are any questions, because I'm done. Thank you.
So the issue of drawing out works in tandem with drawing near to the Creator. In other words, things are drawn out, but sacrifice means draw near to the Creator. So as these things are drawn out, we have to do that which is allows ourselves to be closer to the Creator, meaning I was looking at, as you were speaking, the root word of sacrifice is to make sacred, to sanctify, purify, consecrate, set apart. So once these things are drawn out of us, then we have the responsibility to draw near to that which created us. In other words, if the Creator is love, then we have the responsibility of letting go of anger and hate and envy and strife. If the Creator is truth, then our responsibility is to let go of ignorance, to let go of falseness, that kind of stuff. Is that in line with what you're talking about?
Yes, but with an addendum to that. When we draw out of us those adverse characteristics, it's not that we then draw near to the Creator. It is that we begin to see how close we have always been to the Creator, just blinded by those things. For example, the atomic structure of us, the atoms that make us, is hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. And the atoms that make up the universe are exactly the same, in exactly the same order: hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. So what does that say to us? If our womb, that's translated as father, if our womb is both masculine and feminine, and it is the universe, it is the energy, all the energy that exists in the universe. And then if we are exactly the same, it is impossible for us to get closer to our Creator, because we are our Creator and the Creator is us. However, it is possible to be blinded to that. It is possible to be taught that it is impossible for us to be close to it. However, when we discard those things that we've been taught, when we purge ourselves of it, that is when we see we've always been one. We've just not paid any attention to it, or we have been taught to see differently. Does that make sense, Bob?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I want to take you back to when you mentioned the genealogy and the emotions and what those names mean, emotions and some of it fears or whatever that we have to overcome. I wanted to go back into that a little bit more. But before you do, I want to, Charles, are you on the line? We started off with his question. I just want to make sure that he heard and got that portion of it. He's okay with it. Maybe he's not here today. Okay. Yeah, if you would please, that sort of got my attention. Those names again. Say that portion again for me. Does that have anything at all to do with the animals in Genesis? The name of the animal, is that coming from the same place? Knowing how to discipline those instincts that you may have?
Yes. There's one thing that all of us know who studied the scriptures, and that is that the names speak of character, the type of character of the person who that name is applied to. So yes, genealogy is a story within itself. When we looked at 1 Samuel, and we looked at the genealogy in 1 Samuel, what did we see? The confusion came when we were trying to make sense of who begat whom. However, when we tossed that to the side and looked up what the names mean from the original text, what do they mean, then we were able to put the story together about what was being said. The struggle comes because when you are conquered in a physical way, what happens is the conqueror, in our case the enslaver, refuses to allow you to use your language, refuses to allow you to worship in the way you're accustomed to, refuses to allow you to recognize any deity other than the one they give you. Which means that once you are forced to forget your language, you're forced to refrain from using the words in your language, then the conqueror is the one who writes your history. And it's very difficult for you to challenge it because the conqueror, the enslaver, has given you a new meaning for all of the words that were in your language. Yet you refused the opportunity to recoup your language. And if necessary, I can show you a stark comparison about what I'm saying when we look at the Caribbean islands and look at the U.S. itself and how things moved through the period of slavery and on different roads were leading to the same place. Does that make sense, Ron?
Yes, it does.
So that is where history plays a part in spirituality, and spirituality plays a part in history. Those two connect the same way the physical body and the spirit does, the energy and the minerals that came from the ground of this earth. those it functions the same way. One, in that it is a guide that helps you to pass from generation to generation the nature of spirituality versus the nature of religion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Let me raise a question. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I just I was about to do that. I was about to say we didn't ask at the beginning about questions or anyone who met. And Evelyn had one as well from last week. I didn't know if she was on the line, if she remembered to write down her question before we moved on.
Good morning, I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to ask Pastor your question, please?
I can. I didn't want to throw any, well, don't say that. Okay. We were talking about Jonah and being in the belly of the whale. And I asked I got a lot of answers. Everybody answered my question. I got a lot of good comments. And I asked that, the question that I did ask was, is the world in the belly of the whale? That was my question.
Hey,
Or should I say, is mankind in the belly of the whale?
this is
I'm
Nick.
done.
I can help answer that, I think. So that experience is speaking to, or that story is speaking to the experience that individuals have when they put themselves in that position. But to the extent that a group or a collective of people can be doing the same thing, yes, they can also be sort of collectively in that experience. I guess it might be incorrect to say that it's, let me be explicit. It is speaking about what happens internally during our spiritual development when we sort of do that to ourselves or enter that experience. But since we are all connected and all part of the same upward returning wave, all of our experiences are connected. So yes, it's not that everyone everywhere is at the same place or experiencing the same thing at the same time, but it is very much possible for groups of people to be collectively going through something very similar. Yeah.
So can you again talk about what it means to be in the belly of the whale so I can get a better understanding?
Sure. So I brought that up last week. I think it was last week, but basically we were talking about the sign of Jonah, and somewhere Jesus says the only sign that will be given is the sign of Jonah. That is the sort of deep place your own connectedness to spirit sinks when you attempt to ignore or run away from it. And the sort of internal sense of that comes with that when you, in some ways, attempt to disconnect yourself from the source of your spiritual inspiration, out of fear, out of anxiety, etc. And it throws you into that situation that is described by the story of Jonah. And the being in the belly of the whale or the fish is the sort of deep place to which that connection sinks when you ignore it. And the internal experience of anxiety, turmoil, etc., that may arise from not paying attention to it. And as I said, individually we can experience that, and collectively, as we go through a similar phase of development, yeah, we can also experience that together.
And to get out of the belly of the whale is what we're doing now. Am I correct?
Pretty much. You just have to pay attention to it. In the story of Jonah, Jonah prays in the belly of the whale. Anytime you hear about prayer or the sort of various prayers that occur in the Bible, it's always a period of meditation, a seeking to understand why you have put yourself in a particular position and the method to get yourself out of that position. So basically, Jonah in the story focuses and learns how to stop running from the thing that he was trying to run from. And that is very much what we're doing on this phone, individually and collectively, and very much what we are attempting to help bring about for humanity as a whole.
I'm glad you and Pastor talk about the number 3. I'm sorry, Ron, I yield.
No, ma'am. That was your question. Go ahead. I just had a thought, but go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just about to say, I see when Pastor talked about the number 3 doesn't mean, or the 3 days doesn't mean 3 days. And then Nick talked about it as well. So now I can make the connection on the number 3 for the 3 days. So, yeah. Okay, I'm good. I'm good now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And just in case, just as a reminder, it also, I think Jesus says just as Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. So that's where the number 3 connection is.
Okay. And all I was going to ask, Nick, is that belly of the whale, listening to your explanation, it can be whatever your desire is, I suppose. Then, listen to what you're saying. It can be a cramped space that cause you great discomfort, or it can be a place that you come out in a new form of life, or you're refreshed or resurrected, if you will, that you become something other than what you entered into the belly being. Is that correct?
That's very possible, yeah. If you recognize the opportunity you have in that space. Yeah. But it isn't necessarily that you needed, within the context of the story, it isn't necessarily, I don't believe, that you needed to be in the belly of the whale. Rather, that's what happens when you sort of choose to run from things you already know.
Okay.
And Nick, so the thing that we're running from, or the things that we're running from, is us, ourselves. Am I not correct on that?
Yes, ma'am. The true nature of the self, the spiritual nature of the self, which is first before all other things, and it causes this physical material experience to come into being, which is exactly why all of the stories, etc., in the Bible are pointing us towards spiritual reality, rather than dealing with the details of physical whatever.
Mm. Okay. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Evelyn. Any other questions on what Nick just explained, or?
I just have a question. When you say we connect with the true nature of ourselves, we were never really disconnected. It was our perception that we were disconnected, or is that what you're saying?
Yes, like all sense of disconnection is relative. There is no true disconnection other than our own sort of ignorance, and the perils that we throw ourselves into out of that ignorance. And there cannot be any true disconnection because there's no existence itself without connection to source.
Okay, I have a question. So is that why when we, like for us, as we move closer to God, it feels like, sometimes it can feel like, wait, where is he? Where's the connection? But that's just a physical thing in terms of what we've been taught. When we move closer and understand that we are connected, there's no longer that sort of feeling of, okay, I feel the spirit. We don't need that anymore because we are the spirit. If you see what I'm saying, it's like you don't hear your own heartbeat, but you know it's there because it's such a part of you that you don't even realize it anymore. You know it's there, but you don't realize it. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think so. But I want to make the distinction between not feeling it as a result of ignorance versus being immersed within it and not having to, quote, look for it anywhere. Because we can always still learn from other aspects of ourselves that we don't quite fully know yet. And that very much comes through as a feeling in a lot of our experience. But yes, I see what you're saying. And I want to ask that question. Okay, we draw closer to God. What is that? What does that mean when we say that? Because it's definitely not whatever is presented in the sort of religious institution of Christianity.
I can.
Oh, go ahead.
It's understanding that you and your creator are one, that you're not separate from, you're continuously one with. So that drawing closer is something that we say, but I think it's more like what Audrey just explained. You understand your unicity, and so you don't have to take the scenic route and sidetrack into, what if I do this to get closer to God? What about you are one with the Creator.
I agree. It's the thing you're drawing closer to is you. Because as you said, you and the Creator are one. I and the Father, translated as Father there in the New Testament, I and the Creator are one. The I that you are and the Creator are one and the same thing. And that doesn't mean the sort of our mundane, more ego-based definition of who and what we are. That means when we do that meditative work to uncover the layers of the self, we are continually pointed in the direction of the true nature of the self, which is the Creator. Thank you.
I know when I said the closer we get to God, the more ungodly it will appear. When I said that, what I meant is, I don't know. I had no clue what that looked like. I had no clue what it meant. All I know is that it came from the depths of my soul. And when I said it with confidence because of the origin of it. And now that we have traveled this journey as far as we have, I see very clearly what that meant. The Creator was saying that you ought to speak to them in words that they understand. If I had said at that point that the closer you get to God, the more you are going to see that you are God, a lot of people would have been lost from the conversation at that point. So the Creator gave me the words to speak that would create an interest as opposed to shut people down. And now here we are, realizing that the closer we get to God, the more we realize that we've never been separated from God. And the more we look for God, the more we look inside of ourselves in order to find who God is. And the answer to who God is that God is you. Is it not written in your scriptures that I say that ye are gods? Was the response that Jesus gave to the priests when they to the Sadducees when they challenged him about presenting himself as God. I'm done. I want to be clear to see if there are questions also about where we stopped when we received the elder's question, because I think the two of them are intertwined actually.
Well, before we go, I guess too far, I have comment on the question that Nick asked, and then even in what you just said, both of them tied together. And I always took your saying that as I began to understand more and more about the closer you get to God, the less godly it looks, is that realization and walking and understanding that starts to happen subtly more and more and more. It's kind of, from our religious standpoint, sacrilegious, because you're realizing that you are God, but not just also just hearing it, but even in the experience of actually understanding it. And in terms of what does it mean to be close to God, and I agree with everything that has been said thus far. I will add on to it, at least for me, in terms of realizing and understanding and walking to a more so experiencing. So even from a subconscious level where it becomes more and more real and apparent that I am, and all of us in a sense, are apertures of God. And as an aperture of God, as we our awareness becomes closer to God, it is the universe of those different apertures getting to know itself in a different and better way. It's as if we are apertures of the universe exploring itself in a sense. And even in terms of being in this world, so to speak, and I'm saying this very, very, very carefully in terms of, it's not that in the sense of our current awareness that we are not human in some sense. It is more so of being closer to God, as in or as in this particular form of understanding of ourselves, more so becoming, I guess, a superhuman that is more aware of his extension and who it is while having a human experience. I said a lot, but I'm done. Finish.
The human experience. We talk about that a lot. But what is that?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would briefly say, in terms of us being closer to God and me mentioning that aperture thing just now, that the human experience is just one of many, many ways of us as the creator and the universe actually experiencing itself in a certain way, in a certain specialized way, in terms that is a totally different experience, let's say, for those who have a transition and or experience, and even what we have in the universe experience through ourselves before this human experience is no difference. I guess just as an analogy, when we think about all the roles or the things that we've done throughout our lives, whether that be a child, and it's very, very simplistic analogy, being a child, brother, sister, father, mentor, parent, different, more than one professions, in a sense, playing a sport or whatever. This is just one of those things, in a sense, you can kind of say is a study or experience of putting a certain hat on. And in doing that, in each one of those things that I just mentioned, all of these multitude of things that we've done in our lives, we have created and been part of different experiences, in a sense, that have not been or ever experienced before quite in that way, but it is unique to ourselves. All of us can go and watch the same exact film in the same exact movie theater, and that for which it does to us within ourselves, or how we interact with that movie, our experience of that movie is maybe similar in ways, but absolutely unique to ourselves and totally different. In the same way, we are the creator. When we say we are God, we are God experiencing this world, but understanding at the same time that we are experiencing this world. Now, in terms of being close to God or having awareness of God, that is dependent upon, I think, like it was Ms. Audrey or Barbara said, just the idea of being aware of that. But regardless of that awareness being there or not, it is absolutely taking place because it is the nature of who we are. My apologies if I went too far off.
No, I agree with all of that. I agree with everything that you said about the Elohim having a human experience. It's true, because it's experiencing the physical world as well as spiritual. Yet, there is what I call, and I don't know what anyone else would label it as, is the ultimate human experience. And that ultimate, to me, the ultimate human experience is when the human has the exact same experience that its creator has. What does that mean? The energy, the spirit that brought into existence the entity called human did it for a purpose. All the adversarial thoughts, all the adversity that we face is purposely in this earth consciousness for a reason. And the reason for it is for us to have the same experience that our Creator had. So what is that experience? The experience that our Creator had was creating something in His image and likeness. And up to this point, we've been taught that that experience of creating something in image and likeness is giving birth to a child. That's not it. Giving birth to a child creates an opportunity for us to get to the place where we can have the ultimate experience as humans. The ultimate experience as humans, as I see it, is also humans created in its image and likeness. How does that work when we're talking about it spiritually? Because that's the only thing that reality is, spiritual. The adversity is here for a reason, as I say. It's the substance. It is the catalyst that propels us to move in a direction that we are able to fulfill the divine experience that we were created to fulfill. I'm going to throw out some arbitrary numbers in terms of years. I think I used the number 300,000 before. For 300,000 years, humanity in the East, humanity revered its creator. And it saw itself as being the image and likeness of its creator. And in seeing that, it began to create other humans in its likeness and image. Example, when the first human was brought into the earth, it exited from the womb of an African woman. And that is not all history. That is not all anthropology. That is also spiritual truth. As it exited from that womb, and the offsprings from that womb began to understand the relationship between them and the entity that created everything that is, it began to teach the same things to its offspring, thus created in its image and likeness. And as migration took place and moved into places, let's say China, India, all of the other things that we call religion, especially one of the most popular one is Buddha, enlightenment. The objective was to create others in its image and likeness. And the true nature of the Buddha is not masculine at all. The one who came from the womb of that Kushite woman in India, out of which the Buddha, the enlightenment, flowed, this man born who began to enlighten humanity in its midst as to who it is, saying that anyone can be Buddha, and anyone can be the enlightenment of the earth, which means that it was created in its image and likeness. So what happened is the Buddha, was not revered. It was the womb that Buddha came out of that was revered, which means that this whole understanding of enlightenment through Buddha was feminine. It was feminine because of how it was birthed. It did not become masculine until Europeans moved in and began to discount the reverence that was bestowed upon the womb out of which that male entity exited. So here we are, 300,000 years later. Of course, it's more than that, but let's just say 300,000 years later. And how do we continue that process? Because that process was interrupted. That process was impeded by a group of people who knew absolutely nothing about spirituality, had no clue as to what it is. So why would any entity in the earth be brought into the earth without a clue as to what spirituality is? As uncomfortable as it may make people, the truth of the matter is these entities were brought into the earth as the substance to be utilized for the purpose of creating in the image and likeness of the firstborn of the earth. Because the image and likeness of the firstborn to the earth is understood to be more spiritual, more forgiving, more loving than any other group of people on the face of the earth. So the image and likeness of the African is a likeness of loving kindness. It has nothing to do with the brown in the skin. That's just a racist comment. The browning of the skin is simply a physical manifestation of the desired reality of spirituality, which means that it is the attitude, it is the essence, it is the characteristics that were in play in the earth before the interlude with those who sought to manipulate or destroy everything they didn't understand. Right now, we are in the process, whether we are aware of it or even like it, we are in the process of bringing humanity into the human experience of likeness and image. Likeness and image does not speak to your body structure, your skin color. That's what Europeans brought into play. Likeness and image speak to your character, the character of loving kindness, the character of forgiveness, the character of mercy, the character that will not allow you to be genocidal in your actions, that will not allow you to subjugate other humans to the barbaric practices that we have been subjected to. And in spite of all of those barbaric practices, there's one thing that we as a people, of course some has, but as a group of people, is one thing we have not lost: loving kindness, forgiveness, and mercy. We have not lost those principles. So the ultimate human experience is to do the same thing that our Creator did, to create in our image and likeness, which means to bring into existence a mindset that focuses on loving kindness, forgiveness, mercy, etc. Does that make sense? That's how I see the ultimate human experience. I know you're processing something. And like I said, it may be uncomfortable, but that's what it is. Matter of fact, it's uncomfortable for people to even mention that all of humanity came from the womb of an African woman. I was looking at something, reading it. I was looking at, and this Chinese guy, he was a geneticist. What he did, he went to every Asian country, and he gathered DNA from all of the countries, all of these Asian people, because he was challenging something that was at the forefront of genealogy in China, and that was that the Chinese came into existence outside of all other humanity. And when he looked at the genetics from over 100,000 people within the Asian community, what he found was that 100% of them had that mother gene, that gene that says you came from the womb of an African woman. Your exhilarated him to know that they did not come into existence separately from the rest of humanity. And the most exhilarating thing was that we as Chinese came from the same womb as all of mankind. Now, I wonder how exhilarating that is to the mindset of the power brokers in this country or in England. I wonder how empowering is that to them. And that's what I mean when I say that it may make you uncomfortable, but truth makes you uncomfortable until you embrace it and live it for what it really is. As long as we don't embrace it, we will be uncomfortable with it. And look what discomfort with the truth has brought us. Look at how much damage it has done to the psyche of humanity. Not just the African psyche, but the psyche of humanity, period. Because the psyche of Europeans is damaged as well. Matter of fact, more damaged than the ones who were enslaved. Because the perpetuation of that desire to keep people enslaved means that your psyche has issues. Something is wrong with your emotional state. And you say, well, that was back then. Let me give you some stuff that wasn't back then. And Europeans do everything. They spend astronomical amounts of money to keep people of color from being educated, to keep people of color from participating in society. An example of that is this. There is a county in Texas. Well, let me back up. In Texas, there was a bill passed saying that you had to have a state ID in order to vote, a picture, a photo ID given by the state or federal government to vote. Well, in that same bill, it said that student ID does not count. You can't use that, even though it's a state-supported school and the ID is given by the state. The only thing that you can use is the driver's license or ID from the DMV. And you would think that that's okay, that's a great thing, until you realize that they began to shut down DMVs all over the state. Until one county in Texas, you have to drive. There are 2 million people who live in this area, and they have to drive 125 miles one way to get to a Department of Motor Vehicles, to get to a DMV, to get an ID, which means that they have to drive 250 miles round trip. And most of the people in this area live in public housing, don't have public transportation, and they don't have driver's license because they live in smaller towns, and they, within the confines of that community, they do have transportation. But to travel 125 miles one way, they don't. That's going through a lot of effort to keep people disenfranchised, which means that emancipation did not free us. It transformed the nature of slavery. 1947, Prince Edward County, Virginia, was in 1947 the first high school for African Americans in Prince Edward County, Virginia, was built. And by 1951, it had become too small because in that one building was everything from kindergarten up to 12. And they petitioned the school board for other buildings. I'm not going to get into the weeds on the story, just the high points of it. They refused to do it. So, in 1951, during that period, this young girl, 17 years old, she organized a walkout of the school in order to force their hand. Well, because of that, what most people don't know is Prince Edward County, Virginia, or the whole state of Virginia, was included in Brown versus the Board of Education. And when the first verdict came down that separate but equal is not viable because it's not equal in terms of the educational process. And by virtue of them being included in that, when the enforcement came saying that they had to integrate the schools, what Prince Edward County did, they shut down every school in the county to keep from integrating. That was in 1954. When they shut down those schools, there were no white kids being educated, and there were no black kids being educated. What happened? The white people complained. They said, "Oh no, don't worry about that. We got you." What they did, they passed an ordinance that said that tax money would be used to fund tuitions for white academies. And they sent all the white kids to white academies. 5 years that continued. So you have a black kid in the 3rd grade, and 5 years later, he's supposed to be in the 8th grade. Now you got 5 years that he has a 3rd grade education. Now you expect him to function as an 8th grade student. That in itself is a transformation of slavery into a determination to prevent the advancement of African people in this country. Those are examples of the amount of money, the amount of time, the amount of effort that's put into continuous enslaving African people. So we must deal with the uncomfortable things in order for us to bring comfort to everyone in this society. Because you can't not tell me that it's comfortable for you to sit up days and nights and weeks and months and years trying to figure out how you're going to keep someone from advancing. But the greater part of it is this. Is it that you're uncomfortable because you're afraid that if these people advance, that they will move beyond you? Because you've seen what happened when Africans were freed from physical slavery and the advancements that they made, all the accomplishments that they made. You destroyed them by burning towns down, by lynchings, etc. You did this. You spent all of this time making every effort to keep them from moving beyond where you are or moving to the place where you are without any help from you. That in itself has to be discomforting. It has to be emotionally damaging. So when I say that the enslavers are just as damaged as those who are the recipients of brutality, the damage is different, but it's damage still. And that the damage of the recipients of brutality, it damages the psyche, and it makes it more difficult to move against the oppressor, because subconsciously you are very much aware of the power that the oppressor has to keep you, quote unquote, in your place or to remove you from your body, which means killing you. That's where we are. We are in the process of making everyone uncomfortable so we can bring this earth to a place of comfort. Thank you. Right?
I'm here. Anybody? Follow-up questions, comments? Okay. This is a good pause for us. There's a lot being said, and I'm sure we'll give it some thought and have questions or some follow-up comments tomorrow. So why don't we pause right here and resume again tomorrow morning? Is there and I started off a little different today because I had a couple of questions on the table, but I apologize if I missed anybody. If you have a questions or a question, something that you did not get in today, please tomorrow have your question ready. We'll go from there. Okay. But thank you everyone who's on the line. Thank you for your comments and questions. Thank you, Nick and Pastor, for your explanations of things, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Everybody have a great day. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Sure.